Are we live? I think we're live. Okay. Hey, everybody. I am Mark Walters of BigFanboy.com with you once again on Comic Art Live. Thank you so much for joining us. We're having a blast here, and we're closing out Comic Art Live with, it doesn't get any bigger than this. I mean, come on. When you use words like hero or influential legend, you sometimes it just doesn't quite do justice enough. I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's get him on in here. Ladies and gentlemen, the great, the one and only, Mr. Howard Chaykin, everybody. Did you hear that? Did you hear that?
I did. I thought it was a line of bullshit, but thank you very much.
I should probably tell people just in case. So we just had Howard in Dallas for Dallas Comic Show. So Howard and I are coming off of like a weekend of like kissing each other's butts. But I am so honored. Thank you, Howard, for joining us. It really is cool to have you on this.
Well, I mean, it worked out fine. Sunday in Ventura, where it's beautiful and beautiful-ish. My wife is out shopping, so you have me for an hour. You own me. It's rare that I'm available on a weekend, so you got me. Last time I saw you was 7 days ago. You and I were plowing through a great breakfast with Greg LaRocque. What a great!
Oh my God,
that was terrific.
It was great, and I'm so glad that we got that opportunity to just kind of hang out and just talk and not be tied up with the convention. Well, it was great.
You were buried. I was buried. We were passing like ships in the night all weekend, and it worked out pretty cool. I mean, it was a great show. I mean, as you know, I'm a big fan of Dallas in general, and you're the only guy who does shows that I'll come to in Dallas. And,
Thank you.
It was just it was odd looking and strange, and it turned out to be terrific. I had a great weekend. That was that. Good company, good, just top notch all around.
You've been taking some time off, like a lot of people, because of COVID and whatnot. And so, what does it feel like getting back into the whole convention groove?
Well, this is the fourth show I've done since I decided that I'm willing to die for my art. And the first one I did was very curious and strange. That was in Puyallup. Portland Rose City was a high energy thing, and I did a show in Granada in Spain a month ago. But your show in Dallas had a level of energy that was just like the old days. It really did. I mean, there was a lot of show-ups. There were civilians, but there were also serious enthusiasts. And it was raucous and fun, and an indication of how good the show was. One of the things that happens with me is I'm an old guy, so when I'm at a convention, engaging with the enthusiasts is the thing that keeps me jumping and awake. And I never had any downtime at all in the time that I was in Dallas. So there was none of that kind of flagging energy level, like I'm gay. Never happened. And that was really cool. I had a bunch of guys across the way from me, a bunch of people next to me, and it was just a general free-for-all. It really was a gas. I had a good time.
I should mention, Howard, we do have a live chat going here, so I might occasionally bring in like a question from the chat. But Mike Bravenik wanted to say, wow, Howard with a beard. And you know what? That's a good point, because we haven't really seen you with a beard very often, but now you're kind of rocking the beard on the regular. So
I mean, the beard started before the lockdown. I mean, there's a photo of me and Kaluta in New York City in February of 20. My wife and I were in D.C. in that first week, and we were doing some lobbying. And then we spent the next week in New York City. And Mike Stratford, the fabulous Mike Stratford, who's a Warner Brothers exec and a really good personal friend of both me and Kaluta, we got to drag Kaluta out of his hole. And Michael is a notoriously not come out kind of guy. Mm. And this picture of the two of us, and this beard is already there. I mean, I've gotten a lot more Old Testament since then. But it was already there, so the lockdown just added to it. So, the nice thing is it makes me look less appalling. It gives me people are less terrified of me because they think the beard sort of gives me a grandfatherly, pleasant countenance, which of course is utter bullshit because I'm just as awful a person as ever. Mark, you know this all too well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, listen, once you have the beard, it's hard to like take it away because it's just easier, I don't have, you just trim it a little bit and you're good, Well,
I mean, I'm overdue for a haircut and a beard trim. My wife and I have to call our haircutter who comes over here and makes fun of us and does our shit. So I'm hoping to get it trimmed before Thanksgiving. But even so, I'll still look, I'll still rock the Jewish Commander Weingate thing going on. Is anybody in the audience old enough to remember Schweppes? Schweppes tonic water?
I remember Schweppes, of course.
The spokesperson was a guy named Commander Whitehead, who was sort of like a cross between Captain Obvious and the most interesting man in the world. And Commander Whitehead was this guy who just had an eye patch or some shit. You know, he's just like, and that was Schweppes. And whenever I think of beards and a white beard, some people think of God, some people think of Moses. I think of Commander Whitehead. So there you go.
This being Comic Art Live and being an extension of Comic Art fans, I have to show this off. And I actually just took this out of a frame because I'm getting a new frame for it. But my one and only Howard Chaykin page. It's an American flag page, and I'm very, 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 very happy with this. I actually got this and had you sign it several years ago, and I'm reframing it because the frame it was in kind of cracked on the side. So, but we've shown some original comic art. That's all we had to do to kind of fit the quotient of everything here.
We've justified our existence. Thank you.
Exactly. I want to talk to you about like back in the 70s comic books. You have been publishing a book that I think is genius level greatness in terms of comic book industry, kind of pulling back of the curtain. Hey Kids Comics, if you guys out there that are listening to this, watching, listening in the chat, if you're not picking this up, you need to be picking this up. And it kind of is a great way to sort of recap the history of what comics were like at the very least from your perspective as well. But talk a little bit about when you started working in comics. What was your first year? Was it like mid 70s, early 70s? What was the first?
71.
71. Okay.
I started. I was Gil Kane's assistant in 68 and 69. And I went to work for Woody shortly after that. I did ghost work for a lot of guys who are now dead. And that was my training ground, my school. My first credit was generated in 71. And I sucked. I was really terrible. But I had a line of job. You know, it's like Willie Loman, a handshake and a shoe shine. And you know, so I learned how to do what I do in front of other people. So it was just, it was a terrible way to learn it. You know, because it's like my, remember those days in high school when your teachers threatened you with everything is going to be on your permanent record. And no adults ever would tell you that there was no such thing as a permanent record. It didn't really exist. Except in comics, your permanent record is everything you've done. And so I'm constantly being surrounded by people whose obsession in life is based on nostalgia. And nostalgia is good nostalgia. And it stayed the hell away. But yeah, I worked consistently and solidly through the 70s, despite the fact of having no skill set whatsoever. And it wasn't until I turned like my late 20s, early 30s that I began to develop a sense of craft and how to do this stuff, and that there was a language. I've been following a thread lately about Gil Kane, written by Stephen Grant. Grant is a very astute observer of the business in general, but also Gil in particular. And he talks about Gil's retraining experiences, which is really, really worth noting. Because Gil sucked too. He really was terrible. He started that very young. And he began the process of reinventing himself in the early 1950s. First with his own nose job, which turned him from a grotesque-looking figure to a really good-looking guy who all of a sudden found himself really available to sex. And at the same time, he started imitating Jack, and then he was imitating Bernie Sachs and the Barry Brothers and Alex Toth. And he ultimately came into his own by the odd interference of Bert Hogarth, who he transcended dramatically because Hogarth was a grotesque. But Gil had a strong learning curve, and that learning curve plays out in my life as well because I had nowhere to go but up. And because I had no real footprint, I was able to do whatever I damn well pleased. And that has not made me friends, but it has made me comfortable. I'm happy with that.
I could fully understand that. I want to mention a couple of things that were said in the chat because I kind of tend to agree with this. Chuck White says American Flag was better than Dark Knight. There, I said it. How do you feel about that, Howard?
It was different.
It was different.
The problem, the reason that Flag is forgotten and Dark Knight is not, is that the comic books are a genre, but despite the fact that they were a medium, they become a genre. They become a genre because they've been discovered finally by the civilian world and have become exploitable product. Once that happens, the material gets gelded and melded into a morass whole. And if you looked at Dark Knight, you can identify it. It had all the significant tropes that were familiar to an audience that could identify as a superhero comic book. The same with Watchmen. Both books are transgressive in their relationship to those tropes, but they're physically resonant with those tropes at the same time. And American Flag had none of that. It did not take seriously the language of that language. For my money, I was exploring different graphic solutions to the graphic problems. And also, I mean, let's face it, comic book fans are people who are much more comfortable with pinup art than they are with actual desire. When confronted with erotica as opposed to cheesecake, they become very uncomfortable and distinctly distasteful, because it's easier to identify with this stuff. And finally, most significantly, is that people tend not to note the resonance that exists between Dark Knight and Rob Liefeld stuff and Frank Miller stuff, in the sense that both those, Dark Knight is very much a book that congratulates the audience for its tastes, and that junk you've been reading all these years, it's really good. Trust me on this. That's what the book is saying. And there's a shared zeitgeist there. The audience and the talent both love the material so unconditionally that it's impossible not to take the work seriously. And I at a certain point in my adult life, I realized that Batman was about a rich guy who had a bad day when he was 8. And that what ultimately you have is a 15-year-old boy's idea of what that rich guy would do, having achieved his adulthood, with all the money in the world, which is he would buy shit to beat the fuck out of people he didn't know. And I really don't warm to that idea. I don't need a rich guy to protect me from the world. I just don't. And I have a distinct mistrust of power that tells me it's altruistic. I don't buy it. A couple of years back, I was going to do a show in New York, and I had a panel scheduled to discuss the resonant similarities between Donald Trump and Bruce Wayne. And the promoter killed the panel as I was in the air between Los Angeles and New York, because he didn't want any trouble. He didn't want any trouble.
Yeah.
So, the problem for me, of course, is that my stuff is I'm perceived by the alt guys, by the Art Spiegelman posse and hooligans, as a guy who's just a comic book loving guy. Hey, Marvel comic, fuck you with that shit. I like the form, the content, the mainstream mass market content doesn't interest me much at all. Long answer.
Well, no, that's great. I did want to mention a couple other things that were mentioned here. So Alex Chun says, I dare you to call him Howie. I'm sorry, he's my friend. I'm not going to do that.
Alex bought me lunch on Friday. So to hell with you, Alex.
Jack in Naples says, you love Hey Kids, been getting it every month. Thank you, Jack in Naples, for picking that up. Rachel Foster wants to mention Howard was also a great fit for the Punisher. I would very much tend to agree to that. And then
the Punisher Max, or I like doing the Punisher War Journal stuff with Fraction. That was fun.
That was awesome.
Yeah. Silly, wacky shit. I really loved that.
I'm curious, when you were doing that, because like you said, it was wacky. Did they just kind of give you carte blanche to do whatever you felt like doing with the character? Because at that time, it seemed like Punisher was kind of they didn't really seem to have a set direction for it.
I hate to burst your bubble, but it was just a job of work. I mean, yeah. It was brought to me. I had full scripts. The scripts were funny. They were nutty, and I was basically just a hired hand. I mean, I had no emotional commitment to the work. I'm sorry, but my feeling is I'm a professional, and my job is to deliver a level of craft to everything I do, whether I love it or not. And the material, the stuff that I write for myself, I have an emotional connection with, for the most part. And Hey Kids is very much a subjective take on the history that I've had in the comic book business. But working on stuff like The Punisher or Wolverine or Batman or anything like that is a job of work. And my job there is to be as top professional a craftsman as I can possibly be. But I don't have any emotional connection with a guy who goes around shooting people because that's what he does. And that's just it is, as my grandmother would say, chazarai. It's just the same shit, But again, my job is to do a good job with it.
And you did.
Thank you.
Let's see. Mike Bravenek says Avengers 1959 was awesome. Yes, that's a very, very cool project. Henry, I don't want to mispronounce your last name, Henry. Henry Jeremek says, Howard, I really liked your Iron Wolf and especially your Dominic Fortune. I'm a big fan of Iron Wolf as well.
You were obviously boys and very available to that sort of stuff when you were children. So, outgrow it. I can move on.
Buzz says, I look forward to seeing Howard living on an island, spearfishing, and making friends with a volleyball. Now, come on. He doesn't look that much like Castaway. I mean, he's got the beard going, but...
jealous motherfuckers. I live 5 doors down from the Pacific Ocean. Fuck you, Dad. I got it on, baby. I spent my morning having breakfast on the beach with my neighbors. Okay? Make all the fun you like about me, but no, I'm a social guy. I mean, people on the street that I live have no idea what I do for a living. They don't care. No one has the faintest idea that I have an entire separate life involving people like you, and that I get up in the morning and I do this. That's my drawing table right there. There it is. No clue. I'm just accepted as a kind of an odd, verbal, eccentric old man who's well married, who has a really cool house. What more can you ask of life? On the other hand, like most comic book characters, I have a secret identity. I'm in my bat cave right now. There you go.
There you go. Mike Bravenek says, I was in college when American Flag came out, and we were nuts about it at my school and university. This kind of brings up an interesting question. When you were doing American Flag, what group seemed to gravitate to that the most? And was any of that surprising to you?
Flag sold 1 copy for every 5 or 10 that other books were selling. So Flag never had a commercial footprint whatsoever. The best thing about Flag was a couple of death threats I got from right wingers. I've only over the past couple of years have I become to be despised by the left. Now, I've always been despised by the right. And why don't you stop doing stuff like that and do stuff like Kid Cold Outlaw? And I have no idea. I mean, Flag had a brief and momentary fame, and then it sort of died and disappeared. And the ironic thing about Flag is that the impact that Flag had was not on the enthusiasts, but on the talent. It's a profoundly influential book on a number of generations of comic talent, many of whom had no idea of the source of the tropes and techniques and attitudes that they're absorbing, because the comic book, the institutionalized fandom, is profoundly culturally amnesiac, and it doesn't have a profound curiosity to trace any idea back to its source. It tends to take things at face value. The reality is, no one likes to think that something they love that was done by someone they love was not original with that someone they love. And one of the reasons I have a great deal of respect for a guy like Bill Sienkiewicz, for example, is Sienkiewicz has spent his entire life tracing threads back through illustration history in a profound and deep way that he knows shit, and we both come to know shit about guys. So that's where that trope came from, and we follow the line of material that goes in that way. And you can't disguise the joy of identifying the source of an idea. It's just lovely. It really is.
Yeah.
Alex Toth comes from Noel Sickles, and Noel Sickles informs Milton Caniff, and you keep moving back farther and farther, and just why does Sickles think the way he does? Just it's a joy. It really is. And I love that.
Yeah. Stuff. I love talking to you about art too. Henry Jeremek also wants to ask, Howard, do you have any stories from Upstart Studios?
Stories? Nothing. Walter Simonson and I were the primary guys there. The original foursome was me, Walter, Val Myrick, and Starlin. Myrick left, and Jim Sherman came in. Starlin left, and Frank came in. I left, and Gary Hallgren came in. And in terms of stories, we had parties. We were a very social bunch. I mean, remember, we were really young. I mean, I was born in '50, and I left Upstart in '85. So I was there from the time that I was 28 until the time I was 35. And we had parties on the balcony, and it was a raucous, loud bunch. And the last 2 years I was there, we had Dean Haspiel and Larry O'Neill, Denny O'Neill's son, as art assistants. And Dean got his professional training working for me and Walter. And next door, Sienkiewicz and Cowan were, and they took up space in a print shop that was next door to our office. And in terms of stories, not really. Just it was a day-to-day run shop. I mean, I was there first and last because I lived nearby. I walked there every day. Walter showed up at 11, read till about 1, and worked later. Walter was not a self-starter. He sort of took a very long time getting rolling. And I just dove in. Someone pointed out recently we were talking about smoking in the studio, and my ashtray was emptied every night, every morning, and every night. By the time I left, I built a Vesuvius. It was a pile of cigarettes. I was a serious smoker, and I quit smoking, I guess, around 30 years ago. And but I was putting it away then, and I was young and fuckable. I was a good-looking guy, and we were just young men on the make.
Yeah,
it was fun. We had a great time.
Jack and Abel says you were working on a spy book with a writer friend of yours that mostly has been kept secret. Any news about that? Possibly like a title?
No, I'm working on. I just did the preliminary work on the first half of issue 5 of that book,
okay.
And it's a project I'm working on with Mark Guggenheim, who is one of the 2 most artist-friendly writers I've ever worked with. The other one is also Mark Wade. I've said this before, that I love working with Googie. He is a joy to work with. We are simpatico. And although he doesn't call out shots like I do, I understand his calling out of shots in a way that I admire and respect. So it's always a pleasure to work with him. And it's fun to do a straight-up spy book. Just have some fun, That's it.
Chuck Arnold says Howard consistently puts out interesting genre fiction and continues to do so. Midnight of the Soul, Marked Man, Divided States are all amazing books, a real prince. Now, where is Sunshine Patriots?
You're pissing me off because I'm pissed off too. I mean, it is hanging there in limbo. It's done. It's been finished for well over 2 years.
We were just talking about that at breakfast last week.
It's finished, and there have been so many, diversions and deflections. It's pissing me off. I yell at my attorney at least once a week in this regard. And in terms of Marked Man, I'm working on the sequel to that right now. I'm halfway through the sequel, which is called Cutouts. That's going to be for that website I mentioned you earlier, Mark Neotext. I'm hoping potentially that we can get Sunshine Patriots up there in either for Comixology or potentially on Neotext. For those who are curious about any interest at all, Sunshine Patriots is a quasi-Western about 2 veterans of Roosevelt's Rough Riders who 11, 12 years later find themselves out of work and out of luck, and ended up being hired as hired guns by an early-morning Hollywood studio in 1912 to defend against the onslaught of the first wave of the Sicilian Mafia. As you see, I'm just grabbing that commercial gusto. Because the world is hammering on my door for a quasi-western that takes place in the streets of Los Angeles in 1912. Just can't hardly wait.
We'll keep people posted when news comes about. Chico Rijo. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Thanks for appearing here, Mr. Chaykin. What books have you been reading? Can you tell everyone about the time that you met the late, great, and scary Alex Toth?
I met Alex for the first time in 1974. He was a difficult and complex man. I mean, there's certainly an element of mental illness there. I mean, anecdotally, I've told this story before. I was in Italy in 1980, and I was turned on to the work of a guy named Ferdinand Tacconi, who was a great Italian cartoonist. He's not held in the same esteem that guys like Battaglia or Topi or the wildly overpraised Hugo Pratt, but I think he's just as good as those guys. He did a lot of work for the Fleetway magazines. And I brought home a book that was about the Flying Tigers, which I sent to Alex as a gift. And rather than the simple civil behavior of thank you, he sent back a 4-page letter criticizing the book. Fuck that guy. And anecdotally, furthermore, he then decided he liked Tacconi's stuff, but not with me. So whatever. Difficult man. The best comic book I've read recently is Tony Fleek's and Rachel or Rebecca Forstner's Stray Dogs, which I think is just beautiful. It's
terrific, isn't it? Yeah.
It would be nice if someone out there had Don Bluth's skill sets and guts to make. I'm assuming it's been an option. It's a natural.
It has, yeah.
And it's just lovely. It's really smart. Tony gave me a copy of it, and then I read it when I got home that night after I saw him in Portland, and it blew me away. It just knocked the shit out of me. That and Stephen Frank's Palomino is really, really good. Palomino is terrific. It's a crime novel. It's a crime graphic novel that takes place in the world of of North Hollywood's country western scene in the 1980s. It's dynamite. Really good.
I just realized that Buzz is actually our friend Buzz. I didn't realize that it was Buzz. So, hey, Buzz, what's going on? Allison Sohn says, couple of punks. Allison, you know it. We are a couple of punks.
My favorite dog groomer.
Let's see. We got. Okay. So we covered the toast story. I just want to make sure I'm not overlooking anybody. Man, the chats are coming in big time here.
They want to catch me before I'm dead.
American Flag is comics as the album. American Flag is comics as the album The Velvet Underground and Nico was to rock and roll, says Jack in Naples. Wow, there you go.
What is that? I've always regarded myself as the Randy Newman of comics.
Okay, so this is a great question because this ties back into what we were talking about earlier with Hey Kids Comics. Linda Craig says, has Howard gotten any grief from anyone who recognized themselves or a peer Hey Kids Comics?
Boy thinking, girl thinking. Luckily, the first arc, everybody was dead. Everybody's dead. Second arc, no, but I anticipate it. I do. It tells me who's reading it and who's not reading it. The third arc is likely to get me punched in the mouth. The third arc is 1980 to 2000, and it's called The Schlock of the New. And it's going to be about fandom and about the advent of IP as the instigator and motivator for the creative impulse. And it's not going to make me any friends.
But it's a story that needs to be told.
I don't know if it needs to be told. I mean, the fact is, much of the material derives from having spent so many years listening to the old guys. I mean, I'm one of the few guys in comics of my generation who was born and raised in the city. Ralph Reese is one, Larry Hahn is another, Frank Burnett is another. A lot of the guys were from the Southeast and California and the West. And so I met these guys when I was fairly young, and would hang around them, and they, hey, shut up, kid. Hey, but I paid attention, and a lot of them were just very angry, bitter old men, and in some cases, bitter old women as well. And they were willing to tell their stories. Now, when I first announced that I was going to be doing Hey Kids, I put out a call for anecdotes from anybody, and everything I got from people were these settling of scores, which was the antithesis of what I wanted. I did not want to put myself in a position of fucking over shitting on people. And, it's obvious if you read the first two arcs, there are certain people who are direct influence. I mean, clearly who Bob Rose is and Sid Mitchell and Ray Clark, but a lot of the rest are really amalgams and conflations. I told someone over the weekend, as a matter of fact, while we were in your show, where I got this bit of backstory and melded onto this guy's backstory and made a new character. And as I've said more than once, some of it didn't happen, but it's all true. because so much of our history is anecdotal. And there's a point in the book where one of the characters says, "But isn't that what comics says? You know, Jews fucking over other Jews." And to a certain extent, that really was what it was about back then. But the business changed with the advent of there were two generations that came in after the Golden Age. The first one were the guys born in 30, you know, like Steranko and Neil and Roy Thomas, Tom. You know, I guess the guys who were now in their early 80s and early. And then my generation came along, born like from 46 to 51. I'm the youngest member of my generation. And, you know, there was a real fan base involved. And significantly, the difference between the bitterness factor of the old guys and my generation is that we knew what we were going into when we got into it. And when I hear this comics will break your heart and all this other stuff, my ears prick up with that, because basically there's a real undertone of narcissism and exceptionalism built into that set of beliefs. I mean, Wallace Wood was a giant of a talent. He really was, but an astonishingly bitter man. And his bitterness, I suspect, came out of the fact that he thought he was entitled to be treated differently than anyone else. And the fact is, comic books is a criminal enterprise and always has been. It started out, you know, the real jumping off point of superhero comic books is Superman, because these guys had run out of stuff to print with their stolen printing presses. They've been doing, you know, spicy detective and spicy westerns, and they robbed those two kids blind. And there's a great line in The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, where one of the writers says they'll treat us right, and they said they'll do right by you by the full extent of the law. And you know, you play the red and the black comes up. I wanted to be a comic book artist, and the minute I discovered it, I was 4 years old, and it was all I ever wanted to be. And one of the things I learned was that I had no talent, but I had hunger and blind rage, and those things could act themselves out and become something. So I trained myself. I became the talent that I am. But I also recognized the fact that by that time that had happened, my sensibilities had veered so dramatically from the audience's sensibilities and the zeitgeist that the audience sought. I was never going to be a major player in comics. I was never going to become a millionaire like many of my contemporaries did by the choices they made of attaching themselves to a superhero character or whatever and doing that. And I was not foolish enough to think that, you know, I mean, look, the best comic book artist of my generation is probably Bernie Wrightson. And he died in poverty, you know. He was never able to monetize his skill set. He never really learned how to take what he had and take care of himself to get to be as old as I am. I mean, I'm 71 years old. And I made serious commercial decisions in my life having nothing to do with comics, because I recognized the fact that if I was going to get this old, I did not want to be a drag on the system. I did not want to have to come with my hat in hand to Hero Initiative, because it didn't exist back then anyway, and I'm grateful not to be doing it now. But I made a decision based on self-awareness. And many of my colleagues don't have that self-awareness. They think their careers are permanent fixtures on the landscape. And it is a transient business. And comic book fans are notoriously fickle. I mean, the very fact that Frank Miller, who is a serious draw, was uninvited from a convention in England this weekend, I think, because he'd hurt because work he'd done 10 years ago to hurt someone's feelings, is a joke. It's ridiculous. It's incredibly insulting, and it's also commercially unsound. It demonstrates a mistaking of feelings for facts, and that's just bullshit.
Yeah. All right. So real quick, I want to go back through a couple of things here. Jack in Naples says, just bought Stray Dogs on Howard's recommendation. Tony Fleeks, please send Howard a couple of bucks. Chuck White says, does Howard have any desire to return to science fiction at all?
Never, not ever, no, not ever, not, no. I got wooed away from science fiction as a reader in the 70s by Archie Goodwin. And I don't enjoy the work at all anymore. I mean, I've yet to see Dune. I may see it. I don't know. The idea of, at my age, seeing a movie that's half a movie and then waiting a year and a half to wait for the fucking second half. Come on, man. That's bullshit. I haven't seen The Eternals. I don't really care about that. I'm not familiar with the characters and I'm not really interested. But, you know, I saw Belfast yesterday. That's more my speed.
Excellent, right?
Holy shit. It just killed me.
Yeah.
I cried like a baby.
That's a movie. That's a movie a lot of people are going to be talking about here pretty quick.
It's just staggering. It really is. It's beautiful in every way, shape, and form. Yeah. I saw Passing last night. The Rebecca Hall picture. Have you seen it?
They just sent me a screener. I'm about to watch it tonight, actually.
After you've seen it, I want to talk to you. We have a question to you about the conclusion of the picture.
Okay.
I mean, there was an ambiguity there that I want to follow up on. And we saw the French Dispatch. So
did you like it? Did you like it?
I mean, the movie felt like, although the animated sequences were obviously a paean to Hergé and shit, the movie felt like a Willie Elder movie. It was so filled with chicken fat. There was so much shit going on at all the corners of the screen. I found out after I was talking about seeing how much I love it. Do you know that Wes Anderson is Edgar Rice Burroughs' great-grandson?
No, I didn't know that.
Fuck, right? I want to see his. I want to see his Tarzan movie, babe. You know, I want to see John Carter of Mars by Wes Anderson. You know,
I'll tell you.
Bill Murray as Tar Starkist.
Whatever shortcomings the French Dispatch may have, that last segment about the food is so damn good that I didn't care. I didn't care what else came before it. I was just I loved it. Yeah,
the policier. I loved it from top to bottom. I really did.
Yeah, it was great. It was really, really fun. Jeffrey Moy says, "Hey, I know these guys. Hey, Jeff, good to see you, man." And then let's see, Henry Jeremek. I'm not sure if Henry was the same one that asked about Upstart earlier, but he did have a question. He said, when you were at Upstart Studios, what stuff was everybody working on at the time? Like Simonson, Merrick, Starlin, Chaykin. What all were you guys working on?
I don't know what Jim was working on. Starlin was doing, Walter was doing Thor at that point. I was doing Flag and Times Squared. And then also, I started my paperback painting career as well. Frank was doing Ronin, and I think he didn't do Dark Knight till he left. And I had no idea who Frank was. I met him a couple of times. I had no idea he was a pistol. Walter and I were the major players. We just, it was a great place to work, very convivial. I lived on the corner of 25th Street and 2nd Avenue. The studio was on 29th between 7th and 8th. And I would walk across town every morning really early, often in the dark, and pick up 4 packs of cigarettes, 2 bagels, and 2 cups of coffee. And I would suck that down, and by 9 o'clock, I would be filthy up to my wrists, just working. It was a great time to be alive. I mean, one of the things about New York, if you want to see, particularly the second season, The Deuce, the David Simon, George Pelicano show, which is about porn in New York in the 70s and 80s, manages to recreate an atmosphere, a convincing atmosphere of New York at that time, to the point where we're watching the first episode of the second season. It's a couple years back. And I turned to my wife and said, if you look beyond the guy in the upper right-hand corner, I'm right back there. I'm there over there right now. That deal. Talking about period work, we're talking about Passing. I mean, Hall manages to create convincing 1920s atmosphere and ambience with just a series of strokes and gestures. It's really lovely. I'm very curious. I want to talk to you about this when you've seen it. I can't wait. You got an actual screener or
I'm an Academy voter, so I vote. They send me screeners.
I was pissing and moaning about the fact that we no longer get screeners. WGA doesn't do many screeners anymore these days.
Well, and you know what's funny though, Howard, is a lot of times I'll get screeners like this, and I still want to go see it in a movie theater because I want to see it that way, But this is one that I'm probably going to go ahead and watch because I've been very anxious to see it.
The aspect ratio is it's not widescreen. It's narrow. It's a smaller aspect.
I knew about that. Yeah.
And again, I'm glad I saw Belfast in the theater because it really was a great experience in the theater. And on top of which, despite the fact that he's become a complete schmuck, the soundtrack in Belfast is just so fucking good. Van Morrison is the sound of Belfast in the late '60s. It's so beautiful. It really is.
Okay, so Henry Jeremek has asked us a couple of times. What would you say are your artistic influences? I just want to make sure I get to that question.
Harry Beckoff, Robert Fawcett, Alex Toth, Milton Caniff, Noel Sickles. That's about it. Those guys. And And as a writer, everybody from Frank Lesser to Alan First, to Dashiell Hammett, Cordwainer Smith. Talk about science fiction. The last major science fiction thing I did was with Jose Garcia Lopez when I did the Twilight stuff, and to a great extent, that's very much me being influenced by the work of Cordwainer Smith, who was where Frank Herbert stole all of Dune from. Smith is one of these guys who's forgotten, who's got his backstory, his life story, his real life story is fascinating to me. I mean, he was just a lunatic and in that case, very eccentric, died very young. And I mean, right now, I'm reading Tom Nichols' new book, Our Own Worst Enemy. He's the follow-up to The Death of Expertise, which confirms that Western civilization is collapsing, and I'm in it. There you go. And I'm waiting for Thomas Perry's new Jane Whitefield novel, which drops this week. Can't wait for that. I read a lot of crime fiction. I read a lot of social history, and I read a lot of historical novels. I listen mostly to popular, easy to listen to fiction. I stopped listening to the radio in my car. It's always inaudible, and that's the deal. I was listening on the flight home from Dallas, back and forth. So there you go.
Very good. Jeffrey Moy says, have you guys seen Last Night in Soho? I enjoyed it, and it feels like it needs more love. Yes, I did. And yes, I agree. And I believe, Howard, I went
in there expecting to see a crime picture. And yeah. My wife has an aversion to horror. She's one of the, my wife was a 5'2" blonde of 72. She's a good looking woman, much better shape than I'll ever be in, who looks like she'd like Doris Day pictures, and her perfect movie is body count movies. I mean, she loves a movie with a lot of bullets, blood, and death. It's, her as I've said, I think I mentioned this here, her perfect movie would be Chow Yun-fat and Jackie Chan in a movie directed by John Woo in 1984.
Yeah, you did.
It would be just fine, okay? And she hated it just with a passion.
Really?
Of the supernatural elements, the horror elements of it, made her very uncomfortable. She just doesn't like that stuff. I went in expecting a crime picture, and I love that Thomason person, the woman who played. She was amazing in JoJo.
So good.
And what's her name? Joy, whatever her name was. I noticed she made a real impression on me on Peaky Blinders. Mm-hmm. Now and what's his name? Matt Doctor Who, whatever his name is.
Matt Smith, yeah.
Matt Smith. I like the picture. I love the look of the picture. I knew where it was going. I pretty much figured out what the franchise was pretty early on, and I liked it. I didn't love it, and I like his work generally speaking. I do.
Yeah.
I did not like that pub crawl movie. Man, I want to punch that in the face. But I'm looking forward to seeing West Side Story. I hate the Robert Wise pictures so much. Movie I loved as a kid. And it's just it's insufferably awful. It's a terrible movie. I'm not a Wise fan. Wise made a couple of good black and white pictures in the 40s. I'm looking for. I'm curious about Come On, the thing with Joaquin Phoenix. And there's a couple of other things I'm kind of curious about. But West Side Story is a great looking trailer.
I think you and I were pretty eye to eye on Last Night in Soho because I felt the same way. I liked it. I didn't love it, but I especially enjoyed the visual aspect of it. Yeah. It's interesting. I'll watch anything Edgar Wright makes, just because I think he's incredibly talented. So yeah, I was happy with it.
I sat through the pub for a while, but I still wanted to punch in the face.
Chico Rijo says, have you any old or new Japanese comics, manga, or gakiga? Have any of those stood out to you?
I was actually talking about that this morning. I have no empathy whatsoever for that material in the least bit. It does not impact on me in any way. I don't get it. But a lot of that has to do with my age, my experience, what I've grown up with, and I recognize the fact that, people half my age are much more interested in that stuff than I am. Comics is a trope-based medium, as I said earlier, and the tropes of manga and anime are just different enough from American style comics that they're alien to me in that regard. I don't respond to them in any way. Where on the other hand, I mean, when Larry Hama walked into continuity with a stack of that first wave of Akira books that he picked up at Kunikinuya, it was like, holy shit, this is something else, you know. To quote Pepe Moreno, this guy's got a system. You know, I mean, it was pretty good. So, but I'm not really. I don't have any empathy with that. And again, people have tried to school me in this regard, and I'm unschoolable. I'm uneducable. You know.
Jack in Naples, I apologize. I didn't see your question when we were talking about last night in Soho. He was asking how was Diana Rigg in the movie. I thought she was great. You know, I mean, it's a small role, but it's a very important role, and you know, I thought she was great.
And I knew what the pivot was going to be. It was. I assume you did as well. You know.
Yeah.
We've been to a movie.
Nick A wants to know of any old school comic masters from Detroit. I can think of one, but go ahead, Howard.
Ooh.
I'm just thinking of James O'Barr, but you know, I'm sure there's probably more than that.
Detroit. Well, Detroit was a mainstay of guys. I mean, you had Storm came out of Detroit, Milgram. Yep. I had no idea O'Barr came from there. I don't know O'Barr. And there was a slew of guys who came in and vanished in the 70s and 80s. Arbel Jones and a couple of cats like that. Keith Pollard. Detroit was and Rich Buckley. You know.
Yeah.
Who was now a dead criminal, but in those days had the potential of being a major player had he played a clean and straight game. He was the only member of my generation who landed running and with all the skill sets required to do mainstream superhero comic books.
Yeah. Thank you, Rachel, and I do agree. Before we we're getting close to time to wrap up, but I want to make sure there's a couple things I want to plug. We've talked about Hey Kids Comics, of course. You have a project that you wanted to talk about. I want to make sure we get to. So I'm going to kind of give you the floor on that.
Well, I mean, the trade paperback edition of Hey Kids, Volume 2 will be out in January. There'll be some new back matter in there featuring 2 short stories that are incredibly self-deprecatory, featuring the avatar of character. There's obviously me in the book. It doesn't take a lot of brains to read that. But finally, Times Squared. I mean, the Times Squared Volume 3 is finished. The book is dead. The omnibus will include the first 2 volumes, the 3rd volume, and a shitload of back matter. Brand new stuff, some of which has never been seen. Pencil work, ideas, unfinished work, finished work now, and again, I've sold 1 copy, so I'm feeling pretty good, you know. And it's an opportunity to finally finish it up. I mean, the supply chain issue that's going on in comics right now is going to impact dramatically on what's coming, what the next year is going to look like in comics, I think. And I suspect my next project may be predominantly digital, just because the paper shortage as it's impacted. But Times Squared and the trade of Hey Kids Volume 2 will be out next year, early in the winter. And I'm working on, as we speak, the 3rd volume of Hey Kids, which is called Schlock, the Schlock of the New, which is about fandom and the advent of IP, ancillary IP as the real motivating factor, and the tail wagging the dog that makes comics what it is today. And that's going to get me punched in the face.
I'll back you up. And then you've got to
give Jusko a call as well, just in case.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah, it could help to have him there.
Exactly. You know.
And then you've got the project at Dark Horse. You want to talk about that?
What project at Dark Horse?
The book we were talking about before we started. Did I get that wrong? I'm so sorry. Did I get that wrong? I thought you were working on a project.
I'm doing a sequel to Mark Mann for Dark for Neotext, and I'm working on a spy book with Mark Guggenheim. That'll in all likely be an Image. But I did Sunshine Patriot for Dark Horse, but they opted not to publish it. I guess I just didn't live up to their expectation and standards.
So we can start a petition for Sunshine Patriots. We got to get that going.
No, we'll find a place. The book is all fun. It's fun. I mean, but again, it is not in any way a commercial enterprise, because nobody's got shit coming out of their eyes or wearing capes and masks and stuff. It's not that book. It's not only in space or with superpowers.
Terror Wombat.
Terror Wombat. I love that gal.
I gotta love these names. Yeah. Says there is a Hey Kids Comics comic book store in Brooklyn. Any plans on visiting?
I only go where I'm invited. My wife explained to me that I should not show up at places where an invitation has not been sent. Other than that, kind of funny. We're in Brooklyn.
That's a good question. Terror Wombat, tell us where in Brooklyn, and we'll look into it. I'll see if I can find some information about that.
I'm raised in Brooklyn,
Okay. Let's see. Simon Lemire. I'm just trying to get to people I haven't got to yet. Any quintessential Gray Morrow works that you would suggest people look at?
I love Gray stuff. And for me, the best work he did in my experience was the romance comics work he did for Duddy Woolfolk at DC's Love Books. That stuff is just so good. It's filled with character. It's filled with great acting. And Gray himself is just an absolute stand-up guy. Some of my favorite times in my 20s were spent hanging out with Gray and Sergio Aragonis in a place called Nemo's, which is an underground bar next door to the old Continuity, where they had a 4 o'clock happy hour buffet, which meant that young guys like us who made no money got our dinner out of chicken wings. And watching Gray and Sergio work that crowd was an educational experience at best.
Terror Wombat says it's in Greenpoint.
Oh my God, Greenpoint! It's so profoundly gentrified. When I was a kid in Greenpoint, you literally took your life changing trains in Greenpoint. It's like Beverly Hills, only with hipsters. Cool.
Linda Craig would like to know tentative appearances in 2022.
I'm doing a small show in Roanoke, Virginia. I'm going to be in New York in February. I'm spending the entire week going to the theater every night, and I'm in the process of blocking in those days. I've already got my tickets for company. Oh, I can't wait! And I'm going to come home my way to Roanoke. I'm probably going to do Vo's show in Austin if the invitation comes through. The implication has been implied.
Okay.
I'll be in Bristol in England in September, and I'm hoping to make it to Baltimore this year because I didn't make it this year for a number of family reasons, and a couple of other shows, American, U.S. stuff. I don't know. I prefer to, my invitation should come 6 months in advance. I had a guy text me while I was in Dallas, inviting me to a show in early November, and I said this better be a joke. I mean, who dropped out last minute? That's my question. It's not worth my time or energy. Thanks, though. So,
John Beatty is in the chat. He says, "Big Lick Howard."
John, what?
He says, "Big Lick Howard." Hi, by the way.
What is Big Lick?
Roanoke.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Cool. Very, very cool. Well, and I, for one, just want to take this opportunity to once again thank you so much for coming to Dallas. It was great having you here. It's been a while, right? Like it had been.
We have been watching the collapse of Western civilization, and we've been doing it from home. So it's great to do the show. It's great to be here for this. And this is again, make it work. Thanks, man. Good to see you.
Absolutely. The last thing I'll ask you before we kind of wrap this up, because I know you got to get back to your wife, and believe me, I do not want to keep you away from your wife. I don't want to be the guy that does that. But the last thing I want to ask you is, considering everything we've seen over the last year with COVID and where things are going now, there's a paper shortage. Where do you see comics going in the next few years? Because you're someone that would definitely have background on it.
I'm convinced we're going to get more and more digital. I'm convinced our delivery system is going to be more screens than paper. I truly am. And that doesn't bode well for me because digital comics is point and click, and I tend to approach comics from perspective of page layout. My dog just walked in and is literally looking at her food bowl, wondering why the fuck I'm not shaping up. But it's hold on a second.
Yeah, I want to see your dog.
Here's Stormy.
Oh my God, that is adorable.
Stormy is the where's the money? Okay.
What an adorable pooch.
Look at that dog. Look at
that Puno. Look at that Puno.
French bulldog. And she had a bath today, so she's really pissed at me. So yeah. What? Look. So
is she like a pure studio? She's like a studio dog, right?
This is a French bulldog. She basically hangs with me. She's got a
Love her.
bed here. She's got her food bowl next to my drawing table, and she's very judgmental. There you go. All right, go look at your food bowl. Have a party. There you go. I love my dog.
Yeah.
And she's not, right now she's polishing my shoe with her asshole, so it all works out. Thank you very much. Look, you've known me long enough. A filter is not something that comes with the original kit.
But just to kind of put a button on what we were just talking about, the comics are never going to die, right? I mean, come on. All these people that cry gloom and doom, like I just don't see comics ever really going away.
The fact of the matter is, you now have an entire civilian population who are completely aware of the material, having no idea that the comic books still exist. But the franchises of the material will survive. And I don't know. I mean, I mean, right now, you know, with the world in which we live, I'm convinced that people who are going to be around longer than I am should be accumulating some as that. Because shit's going to be disappearing sooner than you think. Hold on to your stuff. It's going to be hard to get stuff. I mean, stuff that we used to take for granted as having all the time, it's not going to be as available as you thought. And I'm a great believer in not getting rid of shit. You know, I'm holding on to stuff. I mean, I'm in the process of emptying my storage unit because it's too damn expensive. But it's going to be an editorial process. What I'm saving, what I'm giving away. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm not optimistic. I don't share your optimism for the future. And you know, trust me.
I know that anything could end at any time, but I feel like there's still a lot of stories to tell, and as long as that's the case, I think we'll be okay.
We'll see. You know, I mean, let's use who pisses each other off more. You know, we'll see.
Yeah. All right. All right. I know you have to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mom. Give my best to your mom.
She says to tell you hello, and said it was wonderful seeing you in Dallas. So thank you, Howard. It's wonderful to have you here on Comic Art Live.
Stay in touch. Don't do anything stupid. If you do, let me know because the video rights will be worth a fortune. Thanks.
I will. Thank you, pal. Take care.
Bye.
And that was the great Howard Chaykin, ladies and gentlemen. And I cannot say thank you enough to him for taking time out to join us. You know, he is the definition of the word mensch. And I'm so honored that I was able to get him here on Comic Art Live. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. I tried to get to as many questions as I could in the chat. If I missed your question, I apologize. We'll do it again sometime, and we'll have fun with it when we do. So, again, for you guys that have been watching us all weekend, or even if you just joined us today, we hope that you've enjoyed Comic Art Live. My name is Mark Walters. I run a website called BigFanboy.com, and I also run Dallas Comic Show. If you guys get a chance, check out Dallas Comic Show. It's just DallasComicShow.com. And I want to say a huge thank you to Bill at ComicArtFans.com for continuing Comic Art Live over and over again. This has been a real treat for me to be a part of this, and I hope it's been a treat for you guys that participated in the chat as well. So that's going to do it for this installment of Comic Art Live. It will be not the last, I promise you. We've got more stuff in the future, and we've got more interviews coming your way. So if you guys have enjoyed this, please leave us some feedback. We'd love to hear back from you. If there's something that we haven't been doing that you want to see, let us know that too. And I believe there's still some comic art out there for sale. So if you're looking for some comic art, check out some of the art rooms at Comic Art Live for more information on that. With that, my name is Mark Walters of BigFanboy.com, and I'm going to sign off at Comic Art Live. Bill is about to do a wrap-up session, so stay tuned for that. He's going to kind of go over some of the stuff that we had during the weekend for Comic Art Live and some of the stuff that he has planned for the future. So again, for those that are joining us just now, if you're joining us just now, you missed everything. But if you've been with us all weekend, hopefully you've been enjoying the show. And I thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. So to everybody in the chat, take care. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone.